before the world said goodbye to Lucille Ball, before the lights dimmed, the applause faded, and America mourned the queen of television, she whispered one final warning about Hollywood. Not about scandals, not about affairs, but about 7 actresses, 7 legendary women, whom she said were not just difficult, not just dramatic, but truly, unmistakably evil. Not evil in their roles, evil in real life. Lucille Ball, the brilliant red-haired pioneer who built Desilu Studios and reshaped television history with I Love Lucy, spent decades watching Hollywood from the front row. She learned every secret, every mask, every darkness hidden beneath diamonds and perfect smiles. And before she died, she finally revealed the truth. The first name on her list, a woman the world worshipped. A woman Lucille Ball said was nothing but ice beneath the glamour. Joan Crawford, the only actress who ever truly terrified her. Everyone believed they knew Joan Crawford. To the public, she was the embodiment of old Hollywood, elegant, commanding, flawless. But Lucille Ball saw something no camera ever caught, something that chilled her in a way no script, no role, no horror scene ever could. Lucille had met many difficult actresses in her long career, but none shook her to the bone like Joan Crawford. Lucille once whispered to a close friend with a tone more exhausted than angry, "All she has is glamour. Underneath is nothing but ice." That chilling judgment wasn't born from rumors. It came from something Lucille witnessed herself, an encounter burned into her memory forever. It was 1971. Joan Crawford had agreed to guest star on Here's Lucy, but from the moment she arrived at the studio, the air changed. Literally, Crawford demanded the studio be kept at exactly 68 degrees. She ordered her chair to be placed at a precise angle. She insisted the lighting crew adjust every lamp, every shadow to complement the structure of her cheekbones. Lucille didn't argue. She'd worked with divas before. But then came the moment that broke her patience and revealed Crawford's true nature. A wardrobe assistant, just a 22-year-old girl, nervous, eager to please, brought Crawford a dress with a tiny wrinkle, barely visible. A normal star would have pointed it out. A kind one would have helped the girl fix it. Joan Crawford did neither. She turned to the girl and hissed, low enough to be private, but sharp enough to cut, "You're a useless little nothing. Toilets would be lucky to have you." The girl burst into tears and ran. Crawford demanded she be fired immediately. That was the moment Lucille Ball stepped in and said no. Crawford never forgave her for that. From that point on, every time the cameras turned off, Crawford froze into something cold and lifeless, like a mannequin, slipping out of character. But when the red light flashed and filming resumed, she became instantly warm, charismatic, dazzling. Lucille watched this transformation and murmured to a friend later, "I've worked with department store mannequins who felt more human." To Lucille, this wasn't eccentricity. It was a diagnosis. She believed cruelty toward powerless people revealed a person's true soul, and Crawford, in her eyes, failed that test completely. Until her final days, Lucille Ball held to one unshakable belief. Joan Crawford wasn't just cold, she was dangerous. And behind all the glamour, she was evil. If Joan Crawford terrified Lucille Ball with ice-cold cruelty, then Judy Garland wounded her in a completely different way. Whenever Garland's name was mentioned, Lucille didn't bristle with hatred. She didn't roll her eyes or sigh in anger. Instead, her entire expression shifted into something heavier, a mixture of sadness, disappointment, and exhaustion that only comes from loving someone's talent but fearing their chaos. Lucille had known Judy since the old MGM days. She admired Judy's voice, her spirit, her fragile brilliance that seemed to glow even in the darkest rooms. But she had also witnessed the side the audience never saw, a whirlwind of unpredictability strong enough to wreck careers, productions, and lives around her. Lucille once told a friend quietly, almost mournfully, Judy was magic, but magic that burned the stage down. One story stayed with Lucille for decades. A TV director in the 1970s described a disaster during a scheduled shoot. Garland was booked for 5 a.m. The full crew, grips, lighting, camera operators, makeup, wardrobe, waited hour after hour. No Judy. She finally arrived at 2 p.m., radiant, apologetic, shimmering like a fallen angel trying to rise again. Then, as if nothing had happened, she performed a perfect 30 minutes, breathtaking enough to make everyone forgive her. But then she declared she was tired and left. The next morning, the production fired 3 crew members because the delays had pushed the show over budget. Those people were never to blame, but they paid the price anyway. Lucille's anger toward Garland wasn't jealousy, nor moral superiority. It came from scars. Real scars earned from surviving in a brutal industry that discarded unreliable women without a second thought. She had clawed her way to success by being dependable, disciplined, and professional. Watching Judy waste her gift while innocent people suffered felt like a betrayal of everything Lucille fought for. She once admitted at a private dinner, talent doesn't excuse destruction. And with Judy, someone always got destroyed. Lucille never confronted Garland publicly. She simply avoided working with her again. And when Judy died in 1969, Lucille mourned the brilliance, but not the chaos. To Lucille, Judy wasn't evil in her heart, but the damage she caused was deep, real, and impossible to ignore. If Judy Garland's chaos broke Lucille Ball's heart, then Ava Gardner's cruelty awakened something far darker in her. Ava was breathtaking, so beautiful that people forgot to breathe when she entered a room. But Lucille Ball saw past the surface. She saw the truth hiding beneath the flawless skin and velvet voice. Lucille once said to a confidant with a seriousness that left no room for exaggeration, Ava didn't make mistakes. She made victims. Their tension didn't begin with rivalry. It didn't stem from jealousy or misunderstanding. It began because Ava Gardner, behind the glamour, seemed to enjoy hurting people she deemed beneath her. Lucille witnessed it up close in the mid-1960s, inside an MGM fitting room buzzing with activity. A wardrobe assistant, young, nervous, trying her best, brought Ava a freshly steamed dress. There was a tiny flaw, a seam slightly softened from oversteaming, nothing that would ruin the garment, nothing worth raising a voice over. But Ava's reaction was volcanic. She stared at the girl with predatory calm, then said slowly, as if savoring every word, "Don't bother fixing it. You can't fix incompetence with more incompetence." The girl froze, humiliated. Lucille felt her chest tighten. This wasn't diva behavior. This wasn't a bad mood. This was domination for pleasure. And it didn't stop there. At an industry cocktail party weeks later, someone casually mentioned Lucille's name in a conversation. Ava smirked and, in front of an entire circle of producers and actors, said loudly, "Oh, the washed-up clown? She's still working?" The room gasped. Ava didn't care. The cruelty wasn't accidental. It was sharpened like a blade and wielded without hesitation. Lucille, who valued kindness and hard work over glamour, felt sickened. She believed that beauty could blind audiences, but it could never fool someone who had survived Hollywood's darkest corners. She admitted privately, if she hadn't been beautiful, no one would have tolerated who she really was. Their relationship never healed. Ava's beauty became legend, but Lucille's memory of her hardened into permanent disgust. Even in her later years, whenever Ava's face appeared in documentaries or magazines, Lucille would mutter the same haunting sentence under her breath. People have no idea what she was behind the face. If Ava Gardner wounded with beauty sharpened into cruelty, then Bette Davis delivered pain with something colder, deliberate precision. Everyone admired Bette Davis's extraordinary talent, her power, her intensity, her ability to command a room simply by existing. Everyone admired her except Lucille Ball. Lucille wasn't intimidated by Bette's fame. She wasn't jealous of her Oscars. What she could never accept was how easily Bette Davis seemed to enjoy hurting people who couldn't fight back. Lucille once asked privately, almost in disbelief, why does she enjoy hurting people so much? Lucille didn't need years to figure Bette out. One night told her everything. It was an industry dinner in the mid-1960s. Tables gleamed with silverware. Soft lighting glowed across gowns and tuxedos, and the room buzzed with polite laughter, until a young waiter made a simple mistake. He brought the wrong wine to Bette Davis. The entire room fell silent as Bette snarled at the boy. "Do you even know how to read a label, or is that beyond you?" The waiter apologized again and again, voice shaking. But Bette kept going, prolonging the humiliation, savoring the spectacle like a performance crafted purely for cruelty. Lucille watched, stunned. This wasn't frustration. This wasn't diva behavior or artistic temper. This was a person enjoying the destruction of someone powerless. Bette later spotted Lucille across the room and raised a glass in a mocking toast, as if the cruelty had been nothing but entertainment. Lucille didn't smile back. She had already seen enough. She confided later. Crawford was cold, but Bette enjoyed inflicting the wound. And to Lucille Ball, that was the ultimate unforgivable sin. Lucille believed that greatness, true greatness, should uplift the people around you. It should protect. It should inspire. But Bette Davis wielded her greatness like a weapon, and she never cared who it cut. The two women lived in the same city, the same era, the same Hollywood circles. Yet they avoided each other like oil and water. Even decades later, when producers begged Lucille to appear with Bette in tributes and retrospectives, she declined. Some wounds, she believed, were not worth reopening. When the other actresses' names came up, Crawford, Garland, Ava, Bette, Lucille Ball reacted with fear, frustration, or disappointment. But when someone mentioned Zsa Gabor, Lucille didn't flinch. She laughed. Not a friendly laugh, not admiration, but a laugh that said, of course, that woman. Because to Lucille, Zsa wasn't dangerous like Crawford, nor tragic like Garland, nor vicious like Ava or Bette. To Lucille Ball, Zsa Gabor was something she despised even more. A fraud, a walking performance, a person who was fake down to the bone. Lucille didn't hate her beauty. She didn't hate her fame. What she loathed, truly loathed, was the weaponized charm Zsa used to treat people like disposable props. It all crystallized at a charity event in the late 1960s. The cameras flashed as Zsa floated into the ballroom draped in diamonds, furs, and smiles. The crowd saw a queen. Lucille saw a mask. When the photographers moved away, Zsa face shifted instantly, her smile dropping like a curtain falling after a show. A polite volunteer approached to guide her to her seat. Zsa snapped, "I don't sit with peasants." Lucille saw the entire exchange from across the room. That one line was enough to make her recoil, but the worst was yet to come. Another volunteer, a young woman barely 20, accidentally brushed Zsa's fur coat while passing behind her. Instead of gently correcting her, Zsa leaned in with a sweet, sugary smile and whispered, "Sweetheart, you touch my coat again, and I'll make sure you never work another event in this town." She delivered the threat like a compliment, with a smile, with warmth, with fake elegance. Lucille felt sick. To her, fake kindness was the most dangerous form of cruelty because it fooled everyone except the victims. She told a close colleague later that night, "Nothing about her is real, not the accent, not the elegance, not even the kindness." To Lucille, a fake person could disarm you. A fake person could infiltrate the room. A fake person could fool the world while destroying people quietly behind the velvet curtains. And Zsa proved her right again decades later in 1989, when she slapped a Beverly Hills police officer after a traffic stop. Lucille's reaction was simple. She didn't gasp. She didn't act shocked. She just muttered, "There she is, the real one." To the end of her life, Lucille never forgave Zsa Gabor, and in her eyes, the most dangerous form of evil was the kind that smiled while it stabbed. By the time Lucille Ball reached the final years of her life, she had seen Hollywood change, transform, reinvent itself, and yet somehow remain exactly the same behind the curtains. She had worked with geniuses. She had survived storms. She had shaped the very foundation of television history. And through it all, she carried these 7 names, 7 actresses whose darkness she believed the public would never understand. Some were cruel, some were chaotic, some were cold, and some were simply fake. But they all had one thing in common. They revealed to Lucille who they truly were when no cameras were rolling. Before she died, she allowed herself one moment of honesty the world rarely heard from her. She spoke about these women not to gossip, not to settle scores, but to warn people about a truth she had learned too late. Hollywood hides its monsters in plain sight. She said that the brightest lights cast the darkest shadows, and behind the sparkling gowns, flawless makeup, and carefully rehearsed charm, some stars were not stars at all, but the storms waiting to devour whoever stood too close. And then she asked a question, one that echoed longer than any punchline she ever delivered on a screen. If these were the women Hollywood celebrated, how many more are still being celebrated today? It wasn't anger, it wasn't bitterness, it was a challenge to audiences, to fans, to anyone who believed fame equaled goodness. Because Lucille Ball, the queen of television comedy, the woman who made millions laugh, knew the truth better than anyone. In Hollywood, the villains don't always play villains. Sometimes they play icons. She left that warning behind like a final message, sealed inside a time capsule, waiting for the world to decide whether it would listen. And now that you've heard all 7 names Lucille revealed, one final question remains. Which story shocked you the most? And do you believe Hollywood still hides people like this today? Your answer might surprise more people than you think.